we're going to look at something which isn't quite mind reading, but is almost as effective. You may know this as empathy, but that word really doesn't reveal the true power of this technique. You see, most people walk through the world wrapped up in their own head. They walk through life carrying around their own memories, their own baggage, their own story. If you think back to the storytelling lesson as part of this series, you'll learn that everybody has their story, and you would have learned some techniques for listening to someone's story and finding out what it is. Well, remember that, because that's relevant for this lesson, and also realize that you have a story as well. And beyond that, you also have things going on. And most people seem to walk around with this cloud in front of their head that prevents them from really connecting with other people and really being able to influence them and talk to them where they are. You'll know from the silence lesson that you recently experienced that being able to hold your silence and carry out the process of influence without actually speaking or speaking too much can be incredibly powerful because of the sub-communication, the implication of holding your silence in certain situations. It is incredibly effective. What's equally powerful is being able to understand completely and instantly exactly where somebody's coming from. Now, this really has one simple process, and that is put yourself in their shoes. Metaphorically, of course, not literally. Put yourself in their shoes, in their position, and ask yourself the one simple magic question. And if you ask yourself this question in nearly all the interactions you have, and you get used to asking yourself this question, you'll get better at finding the answer to it. And when you can find the answer to this question intuitively at the start of every interaction you're giving, and you have the strength to move beyond your own sort of personal cloud of distortion and see purely and completely the answer to this question, it will be as if you can read minds. It will be as if you can instantly step inside somebody's head and discover exactly where they're coming from. Because when you know exactly where they're coming from, you can ask yourself the second question. And the second question will give you the tools to immediately persuade somebody, no matter what state of mind they're in, to take the course of action that is most beneficial to them. It is hugely powerful stuff. So before I teach you question 2, I guess I should probably teach you question 1. Now, question 1 is really, really important. As you're interacting with somebody, you'll notice they're displaying a lot of subtle communications. It's way beyond the words they're saying. It's their body language, it's their tonality. It's all the stuff that I've taught you, the patterns of language that they're using, being used by them subconsciously to give you clues as to their beliefs, as to their real state of mind, as to where their heart and mind actually are in that situation. So as you're observing them, think about their story. Re-listen to the storytelling lesson if you've forgotten about that. Think about their story. Think about the tells. What tone of voice are they speaking in? Are they in a defensive posture, an open posture? Are they in a controlling posture? Are they in a submissive posture? Are they open or are they closed? Think about all that. Think about the specific factual situation that they're in. What are they going on? Think about what they may want. Think about what they may not want. These are their towards and away from motivations. Everybody is always going towards something and away from something. It's far more complicated than that, obviously, but as a simplification, towards and away from. Think about in the specific dynamic that you're interacting with somebody in. What are they moving towards? And what are they moving away from? And when you have gathered all that information, that's when you ask yourself the first question. And the first question to ask yourself inside your head is, if I was in that person's situation, displaying that body language, how would I be feeling? What would I be wanting? What would I really be moving towards? And what would I really be moving away from? You're not asking it about them, you're asking it about you. And nobody knows you better than you do. So simply ask yourself in that situation, if I was doing exactly what they're doing, you're putting yourself in their shoes in the most literal way possible. Let's say that they're sitting there with closed body language and they have a fear of doing something. Let's say of traveling, and you want to encourage them to do that. And you're sitting there thinking, oh, if I was sitting there with this person's story, with closed body language, with this fear of traveling, what would I really be moving away from? And what would I really think I'm moving towards? And given that, just allow it to wash over you. You may be wrong part of the time, but the insights this will give you from literally putting yourself in their shoes, asking yourself the question, and allowing the emotions, the feelings, the ideas to wash over you, that will give you so many insights, and it will really allow you to plug yourself into where they are, to understand it instantly and immediately, and to move on from that with a real understanding of what it takes to motivate them in the direction you feel they may need to go. So that's question one. If I was in that situation, expressing these body languages, talking like this, what would I be feeling? What would I be wanting? What would I be moving towards? And what would I be moving away from? Simple. By the way, if you don't think you're capable of doing that, if you don't think you have the ability to really connect with somebody else, to actually move beyond your own personal emotional cloud, and to step into their shoes completely, immerse yourself in their emotional reality, as if you were them, as if you were in that exact situation, and using your emotional experience and putting yourself in their situation, allowing all those emotions to wash over you. Just think back to the last time you read a really compelling novel or watched a really compelling film. Didn't you empathize completely with the emotions of your favorite character? Didn't you feel their pain, feel their fear, feel their hopes and worries? Didn't you really know exactly what it was they wanted and exactly what it was they didn't want? Weren't you right there in your shoes? Wasn't your own life temporarily forgotten, put out the window, moved out of the way, out of the picture, and weren't you secretly, actually, inside your own mind, right in their shoes? Well, that's the secret to the first question. Allow yourself to become captivated and enthralled, honestly and completely, by their situation. Allow yourself to dive into it, become open to it, and actually be totally in the moment, totally part of that reality. Now, once you've done that, you need to ask yourself the second question. Now, before you ask yourself the second question, you need to have an intention. You need to have a goal. You need to have something that you're motivating them towards, whether it's to feel a certain way, believe a certain thing, act a certain way. You need to have your goal. And obviously, if you're entering into any situation of influence and persuasion, you need to have your goal. If you're doing a public speech, it may simply be to captivate the audience, to inspire them to think a certain way, to behave a certain way, to evaluate things, to look at the world in a new and more empowering way. And it may be all those things for a private conversation as well. Whatever your goal is, crystallize it in your mind once you've understood where they are, and then ask yourself the second question. And the second question is, if I was feeling this way and motivated towards these things and away from these things, what would have to happen in order for me to fulfill your intention. So your first question is, if I was in this person's situation, exhibiting their body language, what would have to happen in order for me to? So the first question is, if I was in their situation, exhibiting their body language, what would I be feeling? What would I be motivated towards? And what would I be motivated away from? The second question, once you crystallize your intention, is, if I was feeling this way, motivated towards this and motivated away from that, what would it take for me to do the intention? What would it take for me to feel this way, believe this way, change my mind in this way, look at this in a new way? What would I have to hear? What would someone have to say to me? So let's say you're speaking to the person who's got a fear of traveling outside their home city, and they're exhibiting closed body language, and you've asked yourself, well, if I was in their situation, what would I be feeling? What would I be afraid of? And you'd think they were motivated away from danger and towards comfort and familiarity. And you could ask yourself, well, if they're motivated away from perceptions of danger and towards perceptions of comfort and familiarity, what would need to happen in order for me to travel? And you might think, well, I may need to become excited by discovery. So you could talk to them about the discovery of travel. And immediately you've discovered exactly where they are, exactly where you want to take them, and the bridge between the two. So it's a very powerful three-step process of sort of near mind reading effectiveness. 1, where are they? 2, where do you want them to go? And 3, what does it take to get them there? And that's really simple and really powerful. Just make sure you ask the questions. If I was feeling that way, if I was exhibiting this body language in this situation, how would I be feeling? Given that, and given your goal, if I was feeling that, and I wanted to go towards this and away from that, the carrot and the stick, what would it take for me to achieve the goal? Really, really very simple. The only tricky part is getting away from this emotional cloud that I mentioned at the beginning. Many people get too wrapped up in their own intentions and their own world. They're unable to move beyond their own sort of cloud of identity, their own personal egotistical cloud, and actually connect with somebody in a pure enough way that they're able to plug themselves into their emotions. However, the reality is everybody can do this and everybody does do this. Movies and fictions are examples of when this happens. But there are people in your life, I'm sure, for whom you do care enough about, that if they are in a situation, if they're in pain or if they're in a particularly strong emotional state, you don't care about where you are. You're immediately with them. Now, the emotional connection you have with these loved ones, the state of mind, that's a tool you have inside your persuasive arsenal. That is an ability you have to disengage from your emotional state and immediately and powerfully connect with theirs. So think about that tool. And all I want you to do right now is think about the last time you were able to successfully disengage from this distracting emotional cloud and completely become identified with somebody else, completely be part of their emotional world. Whether it was talking with a loved one, whether it was watching a movie or reading a book. Think about one example. It doesn't have to be the best example or the most recent example. Just one example, and yes, I'm sure you have one. Now, as you're thinking about that example, ask yourself what thoughts were going through your head. What conscious thoughts? And I expect that for many of you, there weren't actually many conscious thoughts. You didn't have to consciously go, it's time for me to disengage from my emotional baggage now. You just did it. You just became part of their reality. It just happened. And given that it just happened, and given that you know that's how it works, you can realize that it really is just a matter of letting go. And like falling asleep at night, it's often harder to do consciously than it is to do when you just allow it to happen. And the only way to give yourself control over this is to consciously practice the unconscious process. Hands up if that sounded like a contradiction. Consciously practice the unconscious process. How do you consciously practice an unconscious process? You use the questions that I've taught you. Question 1. If I was in this situation, exhibiting these signs, how would I be feeling? Question 2. Given I'm feeling that and motivated towards this and away from that, what would it take for me to achieve this thing? It really is that simple. Now, you've got your 2 questions, you've got your 3 steps. 1, the first question. 2, make sure you crystallize your goal. And 3, the second question. Now that you have that, you really do have the, quote, near mind reading secrets you need to achieve this in any situation you choose.